Hey Patrick,
Yeah.
I have a question. I have a question about the whole purpose of of your philosophy and what is the end result that you're looking for with your with your activism?
Let me make sure that I understand your question. Are you asking what the end result of like what I'm trying to achieve with my activism is? Or are you trying to
Yes,
ask
sir.
my
That's it. That's it.
to reduce the level of force in the world, to make the world a more peaceful place?
You said to reduce the level of force use.
Yeah, so the fundamental evil in the world is the violation of consent and the initiation of force. And my goal with my activism is to create more people that are aware of the fundamental ethics that if we lived by would reduce the initiation of force to zero, if not near zero, if not zero. That's how I should have said that. So my activism is to create as many volunteerists as I can.
Okay, cool, cool. So so now I have another question, and I'm not saying this because I disagree with you. In fact, I support like all of your activism, right? So, anyways, by so let's say, for instance, the monopoly on force is the centralized group known as government vanishes. Let's say the society, this whole society comes to a whole voluntary society. What happens then? What is like, for instance, let's say, and I'm not saying this is what's gonna happen, right? I'm just hypothetical question. So, what happens then if, let's say, lots of people start violating consent? They just start initiating force, or they try to force their own ideas or their own people point of a gun.
You're asking me what happens after we eliminate the initiation of force when somebody starts initiating force? I don't understand the question.
No, no, no. The monopoly of force is called government. That's very well known. So, let's say government is completely, it's lost its control. There's no more government. There's no more third party involved, in the disputes of parties, right? So at this point, it's just basically just you and me, just one and another. So the question is, let's say people start abusing, you know, this freedom, and instead, instead of enjoying freedom, what they start doing is they start initiating unjust force on the in. Then at that point, how do you resolve this? I mean, how do you prepare somebody for that specific scenario? That's my question. How do you prepare somebody for that specific scenario?
So how do you provide defense without the government is basically your question.
No, no, no. Not how do you what is it, provide defense? How do you pre- how do you prepare somebody for that scenario, like to rely on themselves for their own defense?
How do you prepare someone to rely on themselves?
Yes, because see, and the reason I'm asking this question because what I'm observing on this what is it, on the whole volunteers community, is that there is a, what is it, you know there's a make believe that, yeah, we may we, we may get a lot of people to accept the fact that the great evil, the monopoly force, is government, right? And that all it takes is for people to, become voluntaries, like basically engage through consent. If they wanna like engage, like this discussion that we're having, right? And so a lot of people are prepared, right? So not a lot of people are prepared. Let's say the whole government scheme falls off and all that. So a lot of people, like, as the conversation I was just hearing, not a lot of people are prepared, you know, for a society like that, because for some reason they're still codependent that there'll be a third party that's gonna come and save them. So that's my observation. That's my own observation. That's why I'm asking. How do you prepare somebody to stop relying on somebody else? from defense, that is going to come to the rescue for their own defense?
I mean, I'll give you a couple thoughts, and you can tell me if I answer your question. I think the primary problem right now is that people think they are protected by someone else, when the reality is that it has always been their responsibility to protect themselves. The government is not really doing that now. If anything, the government is probably the greatest threat to every person's safety and security, especially their privacy. But because they think they are protected by somebody else, they don't take steps to protect themselves, which is kind of worse than not being protected. Like, thinking that you're protected without actually being protected is worse than just not being protected and knowing it. Because if you're not protected and know it, you'll probably start being more cautious and working on ways to protect yourself. So it's like the ghost of protection is actually more harmful. I think people will. There's such a long list of things you could do to protect yourself. I guess you'd have to give me an example of a threat, and I could tell you about how people would protect themselves. Like, are you just asking how you get people to change their mindset from being used to thinking that somebody else is protecting them to actually worrying about doing it themselves? I suspect that most people don't want to worry about protecting themselves. And so I suspect that most people are there's going to be a large market demand for defense companies to help protect people for them so that they don't have to actually be the one to go and do the stuff that is necessary for protection.